All right. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Gay. I'm a high school and AP biology teacher of 34 years, and I'm currently a science educator at BSCS Science Learning. And I'm just going to give you all a wave because I'm so happy to see my NABT family and friends here today. And I'm even more excited to hear some good news about evolution education. Evolution has always been a central theme in biology. However, it's not always been a central theme in every biology classroom. Less than a century passed since John Scopes was convicted of violating the Tennessee Butler Act, which prohibited teaching human evolution in schools. And the Butler Act actually remained in effect until 1967. A mere 15 years ago, the Kitzmiller versus Dover School District trial overturned required teaching of intelligent design in Pennsylvania. Following the Kitzmiller trial in 2007, Eric Plutzer, Glenn Branch, and Ann Reid, our session speaker, conducted this national survey about the teaching of evolution in the US. I'll just say the results weren't stellar, and I'll let Ann tell the rest of the story. But first, I want to share a little bit about Ann with you. Ann Reid became executive director of the National Center for Science Education in 2014. For 15 years, she worked as a research biologist at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, where she was responsible for sequencing the 1918 flu virus. She served as a senior program officer at the NRC's Board of Life Sciences for 5 years, and most recently as director of the American Academy of Microbiology. And I just have to, that's her bio. I'm just going to tell you that Ann is a wonderful and amazing colleague that I've often reached out to for her wisdom and insights. Every conversation I've ever had with Ann has been an incredible learning experience, and I'm so looking forward to learning from her and hearing her stories today. And I'll just note that as you have questions for Ann, please add them in the Q&A section. And welcome, Ann. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cindy. Believe me, that admiration is mutual. Wonderful to work with you. And in my 7 years now at the National Center for Science Education, I have gotten to work with so many biology teachers, and I just think you guys are the best. And thank you for welcoming me into your community. I know that I could never do what you do. I'm full of admiration of you, and I am really happy to share some good news with you today. So let me do the share screen thing. And let me make that bigger. Okay. So we're going to talk today about some survey work. As Cindy mentioned, a survey that was done in 2007, and then a survey that we just repeated in 2019 and published this year. Before we get started, I just want to apologize in advance for any bust eruptions. Also, I figure that if you start a talk with an adorable picture of a golden retriever puppy, you really can't go wrong. So that's just cheating, but that's Buster when he was a little baby dog. And then Buster as an agility dog there sitting on his box, and he lives in the house, and he really gets mad when people have the effrontery to walk on our sidewalk, so he may bark. It's really strange to just talk into my laptop, but I know that there's an audience there live, and thank you very much for coming along. I know Lynn's out there. Hi, Lynn. And I also know that this will be recorded, and so some of you may be watching from the future when, as one of my podcast introductions always says, things may have changed by the time you see this. But the results of the survey won't have changed. So I think that this content will be evergreen. So let's get started. Just a teeny bit about the National Center for Science Education. For those of you who are not familiar with us, this is the front page of our website, ncse.ngo. Please go there and look around. There are lots of resources for teachers and lots of other good stuff as well. But as it says, our mission is to make sure that what students learn in their science classes is science as the scientific establishment understands it. And as we're going to hear today, that's not always the case with evolution, although it's getting better. So now I have a question for you all. How many of you have been teaching since before 2005? So say yes if you've been teaching for more than 15 years, and say no if you've been teaching for less than 15 years. And you can throw the results up whenever you get them or as they accumulate. Is this what it's like to teach these days? You just kind of wait in silence and hope that somebody answers your question? Okay, I see an answer here. Wow, so almost 2/3 of you have been teaching for more than 15 years and about 1/3 of you for less. Very interesting. Okay, let's go on. I picked 2005 for a reason, which Cindy referred to. 2005 is when a set of parents in Dover, Pennsylvania sued their school district over a requirement that the teachers use a textbook that taught intelligent design. And although it was parents who were the plaintiffs, it was really teachers who got that case started because they refused both to use the textbook and even to read a disclaimer to their classes at the beginning of the year that evolution was just a theory. So the case concluded in December of 2005, almost exactly 15 years ago. I learned when I got to NCSE that that day is called Kitsmas at the National Center for Science Education. The judge ruled that intelligent design is essentially religious in nature, and therefore it's inappropriate to teach it in public schools as a breach of the constitutional separation of church and state. The judge's ruling is worth a read. It's very clear, it's very eloquent, and it's really shows that the arguments that NCSE and the various plaintiffs, including and various witnesses, including Ken Miller, gave this judge a really strong grounding in the nature of science. It's impressive. But Kitzmiller v. Dover was just the latest in a whole series of court decisions that one after the other declared that creation science were religious in nature and couldn't be taught in the science classroom. I included this little photo because it's sort of cool. Susan Epperson was the plaintiff. She was a biology teacher in Arkansas in the Epperson v. Arkansas case in 1968. And after that case concluded, they had some kind of a gathering, and John Scopes came. And so that's a picture of Susan Epperson with John Scopes in 1969. I think it's just cool that they got to meet each other. So you would think, okay, we've had all these course cases. This should be game over, right? Nobody's going to be teaching creationism anymore. It's against the law, right? So another question for you. If you have been teaching for more than 15 years, have you ever experienced pressure not to teach creationism or to not teach evolution? So we're going to ask the same question for the people who've been teaching more than 15 years and those who've been teaching less than 15 years, and maybe we'll see if there have been any changes over time. All right, so for people who've been teaching more than 15 years, about 1/3 of you have experienced that kind of pressure. And now for you guys who've been teaching for less than 15 years, which we know is just 1/3 of you, so you should be twice as fast, right? Maybe in retrospect, I should have left Buster in the room and then we could do tricks while you guys are answering questions. Okay, wow, look at the difference there. Only 15% of you have experienced pressure to teach creationism or not teach evolution if you have entered the teaching profession since 2005. That is very interesting, and that's really good news. Okay, so as Cindy said, Michael Berkman and Eric Plutzer and a grad student, Juliana, carried out this survey in 2007, and NCSE was actually not involved in that original survey, but they, Berkman and Plutzer were at still are at Penn State, and they, of course, watched this trial unfold and wanted to know, what was actually going on in evolution classrooms, given that there had been this monumental court decision. So what they found was that about half of teachers were teaching evolution as settled science, and almost 10%, almost 1 in 10, were still teaching creationism as a scientifically valid alternative to evolution. And then the people in between, 40%, were either sort of setting it up as a debate that some scientists think this, some scientists think that, you decide. And about 20% of teachers just didn't teach anything about evolution at all. So clearly there's some work to do. 50% of teachers teaching evolution as settled science was not acceptable. So a lot of people did get to work. NCSE just one of many, many, many groups, including the NABT, which was extremely active in this area, the NSTA, HHMI, BSCS, lots and lots of people got involved. The National Academy of Sciences issued a report on it. So a lot of people got busy trying to make sure that evolution education would not be shortchanged in this way. So we thought it was time last year, after a timely gift from a donor that covered the costs of sending out this survey, to reproduce that survey pretty much exactly and see if anything had changed. This was published this year in Evolution and Education Outreach. So another question here for all of you, this is not divided by how long you've been teaching. Is evolution a unifying theme in your biology class? Yes, woo, 87%. Go NABT. That does not surprise me. But we go back to the slides, you can see that this is not the case for everyone. So the left-hand column is 2007, the right-hand column is 2019. And you can see that the teachers who answered on the survey that evolution is a unifying theme in their class went up from 62 to 68%. And the ones who said that it is not dropped by quite a lot, by a third. Another question that we asked about how teachers cover evolution is whether they emphasize the scientific consensus on evolution. And that number rose from 74% to 79%. And again, perhaps more dramatic, the number who said no to that question also declined by about half. We also were really pleased to see that the number of hours devoted to evolution had gone up. So I circled the bottom line there that in 2007, teachers reported devoting about 4 hours to evolution. I'm sorry, about 10 hours to evolution. That's the general evolutionary processes. And that had gone up significantly to 12.4 hours in 2019. And human evolution coverage almost doubled from 4 hours a year to almost 8. So the counterpart to that question about do you emphasize that the consensus on evolution, the scientific consensus, the counterpart was, do you emphasize that intelligent design is a scientifically valid alternative to evolution? And here we see no change in the number of teachers who said yes. So there are still creationist teachers out there. But the number who said no went up dramatically from 32% to 58%. And that number is even more dramatic to my mind because you also see a really significant drop in the number of teachers who didn't answer that question, who were perhaps uncomfortable with that question 15 years ago. They're not anymore. They say no. They don't have to skip the question. So we went looking to see if we could figure out what made the difference in terms of improvement in evolution education. And the first thing we thought is maybe it's just replacement. The teachers are coming in to the profession who've been taught evolution in college, who've been taught evolution in their pre-service years, and they're much more comfortable and confident teaching it. But it turns out, somewhat to our surprise, that there was not a significant difference between teachers who began teaching after 2007 and those who had already been teaching at that time. Now, I just want to introduce this little rubric that we came up with to put our teachers into 4 categories. So these 4 categories are based on 2 questions. 1, do you emphasize the broad consensus that evolution is a fact? Or do you emphasize that intelligent design is a valid scientific alternative? Those 2 that we've already talked about. So teachers who answered yes, you agree or strongly agree to settled science and disagreed with intelligent design as a valid alternative, those teachers are teaching evolution as settled science. The teachers who disagreed with settled science and answered yes to intelligent design, those we called creationist teachers. There are a surprising number of teachers who do both, and we call those mixed messages. So those are teachers who agreed with both of those questions. And then there are teachers who agreed with neither of those questions, and we call those avoiders. So this graph just sums up the differences between the 2 surveys. You can see that teaching evolution as settled science went from around 50% to up to 67%, which is fantastic. Avoidance dropped slightly. Mixed messages dropped more significantly from 25% to about 12%, so almost in half of teachers who were sending those mixed messages. And then the number of teachers actively teaching that creationism is a valid scientific alternative dropped from about 9% to about 5%. So another question is, are those teachers who are teaching creationism, are they creationists themselves? I think you would assume that they are. And indeed, the teachers who are in that creationist category, 60% of them personally believe in creationism. A third of them agree with a literal interpretation of the Bible. So this is a matter of personal beliefs that those teachers, to some extent, are teaching, still teaching creationism. But I did want to note that the number of teachers who believe in creationism, the percentage of teachers who say that they believe in creationism has dropped from 16% in 2007 down to 2009, down to 10% in 2019. And only 7% of the teachers who started teaching since 2007 report that they personally hold creationist beliefs. So I think that we're going to continue to see declines in the number of teachers who just out and out teach creationism. Okay, so next question. This is an ABC instead of a yes, no. Could you tell us what your state standards are based on? Are they the NGSS? Are they based on the NGSS framework? Or are they neither? And the reason behind this question will become clear in a moment. I bet you guys already have figured it out. Okay. All right, so that tracks pretty closely with the number of states in general that are in each of those categories. I think 20 are NGSS, 24 are based on the framework, and what does that leave? 6 7 because one of the NGSS is the District of Columbia. So we've got some of you from each of those categories. And the reason that I ask that is because of these results. Eric Plutzer looked into whether your state's science standards made any difference in how evolution was taught. These numbers may not look very dramatic, but they are statistically significant. So, and I just circled the one that's sort of most dramatic. The upper panel here is are the results from 2007, and the lower panel are the results from 2019. And you can see, again, this mixed messages group really dropped a lot, and it dropped a lot more in the states that adopted NGSS. So in NGSS states, it went from around 27% down to 11%, whereas in the non-framework states, it only dropped from 19 to 12. So some of these others don't look that dramatic. Like teaching evolution as settled science went from around 50% to 65% in the non-framework states, and from just under 50% to 68% in the states that have adopted NGSS. So in all of the categories, the situation is just a bit better in the states that adopted NGSS. One of the things that we asked was, well, maybe that's because the states that adopted NGSS are the states where you would expect evolution to be being taught accurately, but that's actually not the case. All of these questions, when we say non-framework based on the framework or adopted NGSS, these are, looking back at whether these states would adopt NGSS in the future, and you still see a change in favor of the states that adopted NGSS. This was, as I said, a little bit of a surprise to us. We didn't expect standards to have made a significant difference, especially that quickly. Okay, so another question for you. Have you been offered professional learning opportunities specifically on teaching evolution? And I will just say while we're waiting that probably beginning next summer, NCSE will start offering some professional learning opportunities on evolution education using lessons that we have been developing over the last year. Okay, so about 50-50 have been offered professional learning opportunities specifically on teaching evolution. Would have been interesting to break this down by whether you're in NGSS states or not, because another result that came out of the survey is that teachers who teach in the framework states and the NGSS states are more likely to have taken professional learning opportunities specifically on teaching evolution, because evolution is woven so thoroughly into those NGSS standards. And that's particularly true for teachers who've been teaching since before 2007. So if you remember back to when I showed you that result that we didn't see a big difference between teachers who'd been teaching for a long time and newer teachers, we think that this might be part of the reason that some of those more senior teachers have been able to go back and get some more training on how to teach evolution if they were among those groups who were either avoiding it or sending mixed messages. So that we think that that might be where some of that improvement came from. So that's the end of my formal presentation. I did want to leave plenty of time for questions and comments. I just want to thank our staff who you see here. We are a small but mighty organization, and we welcome all of you to join us. You can go to ncsc. Oh, I need to change that. It's ncsc.ngo.join or /join. We changed our web domain last year. You can see Buster over there. He is officially on our staff page as the Director of Fun. which he's extremely talented at. Unfortunately, since the pandemic, he hasn't been into the office. So the only fun he's been having has been here at home with me, which is not nearly as fun as coming to the office. I do want to introduce you virtually to Lynn Andrews. I know many of you know her already, but now she's with us. And this is her over here. As I said, she is working with a set of teacher ambassadors to develop lessons on how to teach evolution and climate change and the nature of science, especially in places where the students coming into the classroom are more likely than not to have serious misconceptions about those topics. So areas of the country where lots of the students are very religious, or where lots of the students come from politically conservative homes where climate change might not be accepted. These lessons are specifically designed to get at those misconceptions that the students bring into the class with active learning activities that allow the students to really dig into the evidence for themselves and resolve those misconceptions. So be on the lookout for those. The nature of science lessons are going up about every couple of weeks. There'll be 5 of them. And then the climate change lessons are already up, but they're going to be being updated. And then we should be rolling out some evolution lessons in the spring. And we really hope, we know that you are all fantastic ambassadors for evolution education. And we hope that you will dig into these lessons and give us feedback on them and encourage your colleagues to use them. So I'm going to stop talking, and I hope that there are some questions.
Hi, Anne. We do have one question in here. I think we only have time to take one because we're running really tight up on time. We've got quite a few questions. No, but it was all good. Do declines in the percentage of creationism believing teachers reflect nationwide declines in belief in creationism? If not, should we be concerned that there is a sense that biology/STEM is increasingly hostile to believers?
What a great question. I think the drop in, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head. I think that the decrease in the number of believing teachers is probably a little faster than the overall decrease in the population, although I'm not sure if it's any faster than the drop in the college educated population. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And I would be really interested if people have information on how pre-service programs are dealing with helping teachers who are coming in believing in creationism reconcile their beliefs with teaching evolution as settled science.
All right, one last quick one is a little bit of feedback, but also just a note. I am pleased by the correlation, and this is from William McComas, by the correlation between evolution education and NGSS status, but I'm not convinced of the causation. My experience is that many teachers don't really know what is in NGSS. It would be very interesting to evaluate what teachers know of the evolution content in NGSS.
That's interesting. It would be hard to, I don't think that there's any way we can pull that out of these survey results. But I do assume, and I recognize that that's not very scientific, that even if the teachers are not super familiar with what is covered on evolution, throughout NGSS, because it is woven in from the elementary grades all the way through the AP. I think the fact that it is there so prominently is probably affecting assessment. And so the teachers are having to, integrate some evolution into their courses where they didn't before. That would be my guess, but it is a good question.
And that's all the time we have.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, future people. And go to ncsc.ngo and get to know us. I'm sorry we're not all in Baltimore together.